Have you ever thought about someone reaching, well, incredible wealth in a really dangerous hidden world and then choosing completely to turn their back on it, to become a voice against the very life they led?
It's a powerful image.
It really is. And that's basically the story of Azie Faison Jr., known as Azie. He was a major figure in Harlem, during the crack epidemic in the 80s, a really tumultuous time.
Absolutely. A key player.
So for this deep dive, we're looking at excerpts from Azie Faison, Harlem Hustler's redemption story, and importantly, his own memoir, Game Over, a cautionary tale of redemption.
Yeah, game over is crucial.
Right. Our mission today is to sort of unpack that journey from, drug kingpin to anti-drug activist. We want to look at the realities of that street life, some really controversial connections he brought up, and his call for, well, cultural change, especially in hip-hop.
It's a complex story with a lot of layers.
It definitely is. Okay, let's unpack this. Azie Faison's story is one of those that truly resonates. It sticks with you. So to really get Azie Faison, you have to picture Harlem in the 1980s first.
It was a time when, real opportunities, legitimate ones, felt incredibly scarce for a lot of people.
Right. Limited options.
Exactly. And that pull of fast money, even knowing the risks, it was powerful. Hard to ignore for some.
Absolutely. And in that specific environment, Faison's rise in the drug game was remarkably fast, like lightning speed almost.
Really?
Yeah. He became a major player in the crack cocaine epidemic just as it was exploding. His operation, sources say, was generating, hundreds of thousands of dollars weekly.
Hundreds of thousands a week. That's hard to even fathom.
It's a massive scale. A sophisticated operation, not just street corner stuff.
But with that kind of money, especially back then in that world, came incredible danger.
Oh, immense danger, nonstop.
He wasn't just sitting back counting money. The sources describe him navigating this treacherous landscape, rival crews, the police, betrayals from within his own circle.
Yeah, constant threats. It sounds like being on high alert all the time, living on a knife's edge. What was the real day-to-day threat like for him?
Well, the danger was coming from everywhere. It was relentless. Faison actually talks about surviving multiple attempts on his life.
Multiple attempts.
Yeah, and these weren't, vague threats or close calls necessarily. These were serious attempts. These experiences, these brushes with death, they really changed his perspective profoundly.
I can only imagine.
Right. It stripped away any kind of glamour that lifestyle might have seemed to have.
Yeah.
It forced him to really face how brutal and, frankly, unsustainable it all was.
Yeah.
That really cemented his desire to get out.
And that desire, that need to escape and make a huge shift, that really becomes the heart of his story, doesn't it?
It does.
After getting to such a dominant position, dangerous as it was, he makes this huge decision to step away, to leave the criminal world. And the memoir points out something interesting. Making that move, getting out, was as difficult and perilous as his rise to power. It wasn't just like flipping a switch.
No, not at all. It was a deep internal struggle, a reckoning. The sources describe him going through this profound spiritual transformation after he left the game.
Spiritual?
Yeah. He started to truly recognize the devastation. What the crack epidemic was doing to families, a whole community. He saw it firsthand, how it just fractured everything, trapping people in cycles of poverty, addiction.
And he felt responsible.
Definitely. It led to what's described as deep remorse for his role in perpetuating a destructive cycle. Real regret. And that regret really shaped everything he did next.
So that drive for change, that became his new focus.
Exactly.
And that's defined his life since then, right? He now actively works to discourage youth from pursuing a similar path.
Right. He became a very vocal anti-drug activist.
Sharing his own story, his testimony, as a cautionary tale. How does that message land differently, do you think, coming from someone who actually lived it?
Oh, it's huge.
Yeah.
His past isn't just a story he tells. It's like a bridge. It gives him this incredible credibility, especially with at-risk kids.
Right. He's not just some official telling them, don't do drugs.
Exactly. He can connect in a way that, lectures or formal campaigns probably can't. His life story is presented as this stark reminder of the consequences, yes, but also the potential for redemption, for change.
So hope is part of it, too.
A big part. It's this powerful example of how people can transform, even from the deepest, darkest places.
And so much of what we know, especially about these turning points, these internal shifts, comes directly from his memoir, Game Over, The Rise and Transformation of a Harlem Hustler. That book seems like the absolute core source for his experience and his message.
It really is. And what's interesting there is the connection, or maybe the tension, between his book and the movie Paid in Full.
Oh yeah, the movie. Popular film.
Very popular. And while it is based on Faison's life, he's been quite clear that he felt it didn't fully portray the cautionary aspects he intended.
Ah, okay, so he felt it missed the mark a bit.
His point was he wanted to show the dangers of the lifestyle, not glorify it.
Oh.
And he felt the movie perhaps leaned more towards the latter. That distinction is really key to understanding the purpose of his memoir.
And the book, it names names too, doesn't it? Specific people in his network, like Rich Porter, Alpo Martinez. These were his associates.
Yeah, they were central figures. And the book details how those relationships, particularly with someone like Alpo Martinez, became severely strained. It really underscores the personal cost, the betrayals that are just inherent in that kind of life.
Right. Loyalty is maybe not the defining feature.
Not always, no.
Yeah.
So the memoir's main goal is pretty clear. It recounts his experiences, but primarily serves as this powerful warning about the devastating impact of the drug trade on people, on communities, and also gives you this unique insight into the motivations and challenges, like why people get caught up in that cycle of addiction and violence in the first place. It tries to get into the why, not just the what happened.
That makes sense. But then the book takes another turn, right? It goes beyond his personal story.
It really does. And this is where it gets potentially very controversial. Game Over doesn't just stop at Harlem street life. It sheds light on the controversial connection between crack dealers, the U.S. government's covert operations, and the Iran-Contra scandal.
Wow. Okay, that's a huge leap. Connecting street-level dealing in Harlem to Iran-Contra. How does he make that connection in the memoir? Well, what's the claim?
Well, the memoir alleges complicity. Specifically, it suggests the CIA was involved in supporting the Contras in Nicaragua, the anti-communist rebels fighting the Sandinista government.
Okay.
And the alleged mechanism was allowing drug trafficking, specifically cocaine that became crack, to flourish in American cities. Faison claims the profits from these drug sales were then funneled back to help fund those covert operations, essentially turning a blind eye, or worse, facilitating the drug trade in places like Harlem for geopolitical reasons.
It's an explosive allegation. Does he connect it to other reporting on this?
Yes, he does. The narrative aligns with the work of investigative journalist Gary Webb and his series Dark Alliance.
Ah, Gary Webb. I remember that series caused a huge stir.
It absolutely did.
Yeah.
And Faison's memoir mentions figures like Freeway Rick Ross, the L.A. kingpin, who testified about his suppliers having Contra connections, and Oliver North, who was, of course, central to the Iran-Contra affair itself.
So Faison, through his own experiences and observations detailed in the memoir, is suggesting this alleged connection wasn't just incidental, but that it played a significant role in exacerbating the crack epidemic.
That's the argument presented in the book. And again, we have to stress this is Faison's account and interpretation in his memoir.
Right. We're reporting what the source material claims. But it certainly raises some very big questions about the larger forces potentially at play during that era, beyond just street crime.
Definitely. It suggests a much darker, more complex backdrop to the devastation communities experienced.
Moving beyond those historical revelations, Faison also turns his attention to contemporary culture, right? Specifically hip-hop.
Yes, he's been very outspoken about that.
He sees a need for cultural change within the genre. What's his main point there?
Faison fundamentally believes that hip-hop music wields profound influence. Massive influence.
Especially on young people.
Exactly. And his concern is specifically with how it sometimes ends up glorifying the drug dealer aesthetic, presenting that lifestyle, which he knows firsthand is incredibly destructive, as something aspirational, something cool.
And he thinks that's harmful.
Deeply harmful. He sees it shaping perceptions, maybe even choices, by painting a picture that's often distorted and dangerous.
So he's calling for a shift. He's urging artists to move towards what? More positive themes?
Pretty much. He advocates for artists to focus on more positive, uplifting, and socially conscious content, rather than constantly reinforcing those street life narratives that he feels can be so damaging.
It's interesting, too, because he wasn't just an observer, was he? Didn't he have his own involvement in music back then?
He did, actually, which adds another layer to his critique. Back in the 80s, he explored his musical talents with the group Mob Style.
Mob Style.
So he understands the culture from the inside. He was part of that scene himself. It gives his critique, maybe even more weight. It's not just someone on the outside pointing fingers.
Right. He knows the power of the music because he tried to wield it himself. So pulling all these threads together, the rise, the fall, the redemption, the book, the controversies, the message for hip-hop.
Yeah.
What's the big takeaway from Azie Faison's whole story?
Well, Azie Faison's story, especially as he tells it in Game Over, it really functions on two main levels, I think. First, it's this incredibly gripping cautionary tale about the realities of being a drug kingpin, the violence, the betrayal, the ultimate emptiness of it. And tied into that is this stark warning about the destructive force of the crack epidemic and its alleged complex entanglement with these covert government operations he talks about.
That darker systemic angle.
Exactly. But second, and maybe just as important, is the story of redemption. His genuine remorse, his complete turnaround. It offers a sense of hope. Inspiration maybe for anyone caught in destructive cycles, showing that change is possible.
Transformation is possible.
Profound transformation, yeah. It's a testament to that human capacity.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? Azie Faison's journey, it forces you to look beyond just individual choices, individual consequences. You start thinking that the bigger picture, these powerful societal forces, the cultural stories we tell ourselves, how they shape lives. And it leaves you with a question, I think. What responsibility do we all have, in challenging these destructive cycles, whether it's addiction, violence, or maybe even harmful cultural narratives?
Okay.
And how do we better support paths to transformation like the one Faison eventually found?
That's a heavy question.
It is. And it resonates far beyond just Harlem in the 80s, doesn't it? It pushes us to look critically at the stories we consume and perpetuate and the systems we live within, even today. Something to definitely mull over.